There we go.
There we go. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Gumtree of Liberty podcast. I'm your host, Stuart. I'm joined today by my co-host, Centrist, and our guest, Libertarian Party Vice Presidential Candidate of 2020, Spike Cohen. How are you going?
I'm doing fantastic. Stuart and CentristOzzy, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Great to meet y'all. Yeah, no, I'm happy to be on. Thank you for letting me reschedule this. We were supposed to do this back in January, but I was dying of COVID, so that wouldn't have been a good conversation. It would have been just mostly me coughing. So thank you for having me back on, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.
Well, speaking of COVID, is COVID still dead in America? Or is it still a thing for you guys?
Well, no, because now Ukraine is the new COVID. We don't care about COVID anymore. It's now all Ukraine. Our fear now is that we will be killed in a Russian shelling of a Ukrainian town outside of Kiev. And also you're a bad person if you're still calling it Kiev. It's Kiev. That's our preoccupation now. No, our numbers are still really low. Omicron, everyone got Omicron, including me. So I think we're immune for a few months. And then right around the time we stop caring about the wholesale slaughter of Ukrainian civilians, we'll go back to worrying about the next upswing of COVID cases. But that won't be till the summer, probably.
Or climate change? That could be interesting as well.
Oh, well, climate change is always, yeah. Like as soon as, well, so what tends to spark us caring or being concerned about climate change, but just in the States, China and Russia and Brazil and India can keep increasing their greenhouse gas, green carbon footprint, but we have to reduce ours because that's how that works. That usually happens around hurricane season because hurricanes didn't exist before everyone was told about climate change. And so once that, it's like, oh, wow, this didn't happen until you selfish red staters were driving your sport utility vehicles, because that's what causes it. And so I guess that'll be coming soon during our summer, your winter.
All right.
Well, I wanted to get you.
We're straight into it.
I wanted to get you to briefly, for those who don't know, tell us how you got into Liberty and the Libertarian movement and how you ended up winning the vice president, how you ended up getting the nomination to run for vice president in 2020.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So for those who don't know, it's interesting. If you've only recently heard of me, don't feel bad, because that's true of everyone. I really no one really knew about me in the political world until about 3 years ago. And that was intentional. I was always in the business world. I had started a successful business in my teens and was involved in several successful startups. When I was diagnosed with MS in 2016, I decided that I didn't want to just focus on making money anymore. I wanted to actually make an impact in the world. And so I got into liberty activism. That started with having a podcast like this. So, don't let your memes be dreams. Start your podcast today. All libertarians must do that. And so I started my libertarian podcast, and then that it became fairly successful and continues to be so. And that parlayed itself into people pushing me to run for the vice presidential nomination. The way our system works, our party is different than the Republican or Democrat parties. I'm not sure how y'all pick your premier nominations and stuff like that. But the way we do it is our presidential candidates run for the nomination separately from the vice presidential candidates. In the Republican and Democrat parties, whoever the presidential candidate is picks the VP candidate. I actually had to run for the nomination. And so after getting that, I hit the ground running with Joe Jorgensen to do a campaign of liberty across the country. And I never stopped. The election day happened. We came in third. That was fantastic. But I took about a week off to catch up on some sleep that I hadn't been getting for the past 5 months. And then I've been hitting the ground running ever since. We need to spread liberty in our time. I don't want future generations to deal with an even more authoritarian, even more dystopian future because I didn't do the work that needed to be done to try to make their future freer.
Before we further on, can we double back and just explain why the Libertarian Party does the nominations differently compared to the other two? So a lot of us in Australia, like I didn't even know the Libertarian Party existed in America until like about 2 or 3 years ago. So for a lot of us, it's like, why do you guys do stuff differently? What is it that makes what is it that makes that important to run the VP and the president as they're running for themselves versus as this team within the Liberty Party?
Well, probably the shortest answer is because no one tells us what to do, and everyone's doing it the other way. No, I think, I mean, that's probably the real reason. The reason we give, that sounds way better, is that it allows us to be, as a party, the ones who are in charge of what our candidates are. It's not just whoever we pick for president deciding what the entire ticket is. It's the delegates themselves. It's the people who have a stake in the party as a party making that decision of who the candidate is. Probably a good bit of that is because the other parties are doing it that way. So you're not going to tell us to do that. You don't tell us a damn thing. And so it's probably partly that. But yeah, so what ended up happening was that there was a lot of contention over who the presidential candidate was going to be. And we ultimately ended up, the delegates ended up picking Joe out of a fairly crowded field of candidates. On the VP side, it was pretty lonely for a while. I was basically one of the only real serious people running for VP until the last month or so when it got a lot more crowded. But what had happened is during that time, I had already kind of developed a bit of a foothold. I had been doing a lot of ground game work. I wasn't just resting on my laurels. I had been doing a lot of ground game work to make sure that I had, because we don't do a primary. It's we also do this differently. Again, no one tells us what to do. So the way it works is each state affiliate, each state Libertarian Party of the 50 states picks a certain number of they're allotted a number of delegates, and they choose who those delegates are. Then those delegates go to the national convention, and it was about I think 1,086 or 1,084 of them who choose who the candidate is. So I did a lot of phone calls. I called about 200-300 people and texted and emailed the rest as well to try to get basically a whip count for who was supporting me, who wasn't. So by the time other incredible people like Larry Sharp and others who got into the VP race and John Mons and a lot of others, I had already done a lot of groundwork. Really sort of done all the stuff I had learned to do in the business world. I did that there. And so by the time it came down to it, I had a pretty solid whip count. So I got almost 50% in the first round. It was like 40 something percent. And by was it second round? No, third round, I ended up winning. So yeah, no, we do every weird, whatever. We look at what other people are doing and go, well, no one's going to tell us what to do, and we do it differently.
Well, do you think the campaign of free ponies at all affected?
What was that?
Do you think the campaign of free ponies affected your vote?
Well, it must have helped. So a little perspective there. So one of the main people that actually asked me to run for the VP nomination was Vermin Supreme, and Vermin Supreme asked me to run as his proposed VP pick. So we knew that it would be up to the delegates to decide who was the president, who was the vice president, but we kind of ran as a shared ticket, like, hey, you should pick both of us. And my pitch was that, for those who don't know, Vermin Supreme, he wears a boot on his head, he walks around with a gigantic toothbrush, and he promises everyone a free pony, says that he's a time-traveling wizard. It's basically, he's giving the political system the respect that he believes it deserves. And by kind of forcing, by running for president and forcing political media to cover him at least somewhat seriously, he kind of exposes them for the fraud that they are. It's beautiful what he does. And so I ran on that ticket. I was always sort of the straight man. I don't know if that's a term in Australia, but I was always the serious one of the duo. I would be a little silly and jokey or whatever, but he was the guy with the boot on his head, and I was the guy who didn't have a boot on his head. So by default, I was the serious guy. And I offered everyone free cheesy bread with the purchase of any federal explosives permit. I did a couple little silly things, but Vermin was obviously the more satirical candidate, and I was the more serious one. And the interesting thing was, Vermin made it to the final round. He actually almost tied for second place. But I obviously won. But no, he continues to be a part of the movement here, more on the entertainment side than the I guess the political electoral side. But we're glad to have him.
I know the UK has plenty of satire candidates, Lord Buckethead and the likes,
Yeah.
which I don't think we've ever seen in Australia. So it mustn't be an Australian thing. With your conventions that you have we're talking before the show about New Hampshire as well. How do the caucuses play into that? Because we don't have anything like that here. The party's leader is chosen by the politicians, not the voters who have no say at all. So how do those caucuses end up playing into that campaign for presidency?
So for us, it doesn't play much at all because we don't really participate in the public primaries or caucuses. And without getting into a whole a rabbit hole there, some states do like 2 or 3 states do caucuses, and the rest just do primaries, which is basically an election for who the nominee will be for that party. That plays in a major way for Republicans and Democrats. It doesn't really play in for us. Our version of that are the conventions. So each state Libertarian Party affiliate has their own convention before the national convention. And so we try to attend as many of those conventions as possible to talk to the prospective delegates. So it's a similar thing, but instead of talking to the whole state, we're talking to a few dozen people at a time, or a couple hundred people at a time, and trying to get support state by state. Now, what the interesting thing was there, that actually ended up working in my favor because of the lockdowns with COVID. Most of those, I attended a few of the in-person ones in November, December, January, but by the end of February and into March, by actually middle of March, all of those events started happening online. They started having all their conventions online. Well, that allowed me to attend 4 and 5 state affiliate conventions online that I couldn't have possibly done prior to when they were still happening in person. And the other thing that happened is because I'm a podcaster, so I have a more professional looking setup. I've got better lighting. I've got a better camera. All of these other people were haphazardly figuring out how to use the webcam on their laptop and, using the built-in computer microphone and sounding like how that sounds. And so as a result, my presentation was more professional looking than even some of the presidential candidates did, because I had been doing that. So that worked out in my favor as well. In fact, there were a lot of people who said, Spike's the most professional looking guy here. And I'm like, that's just because I have an actual webcam and actual lighting and, an actual microphone and stuff like that. So that actually worked in my favor as well. Really, it was just a lot of things that conspired to work in the favor of someone that weeks prior no one had ever heard of. And I think I would have still done well had I had to go through the normal process, but I'm not certain I would have won. In retrospect, I'm not sure I would have won, if only because people would have said, hey, well, this all sounds great, and I hope you stick with the movement, and it's great to have you here, but I have never heard of you before. But in the midst of all of that, I every time came away having the best presentation and being used to presenting myself that way, because it's an entirely different thing. When you are doing this, most people, when they are doing this, in their mind, they're in a room by themselves, like I am right now, on this, looking to this camera and just talking like this and reading something on their screen, so they're not looking at the camera. And they're, because it's not real. They're not in front of a bunch of people. They don't get that energy from it. Well, I've been doing this for years now. So I know how to pretend that I'm talking to a bunch of people in person when I am obviously not. So it was just, I looked better. I sounded better. My presentation was more natural. I was exciting to people. So like I said, I'm not, it's much less likely I would have gotten the nomination had it not been for everything shifting so dramatically in favor of an edgy podcaster.
Before we go too far, just for the layman.
Well, I'm glad he had a podcast, because as we all know, libertarians, if they don't have a podcast, it's kind of our defining feature.
Yes. Yeah, no, it has to be.
Sorry, I was going to say, before we go too far, for the layman, because can we explain what a caucus is? So for anyone that was listening, you had no idea, they can actually understand what you're referring to.
Sure. So from the standpoint of this, from the standpoint of people running for like president or something like that, a caucus system, instead of just having everyone vote, everyone already has to be approved as a delegate. It's actually more similar to the system we use. My understanding is everyone has to sign up to become approved as a delegate in their precinct. There's a limited number of spots typically, and it's actually a pretty confusing system. I don't know all the details of how like the statewide caucuses work, but basically there's a limited number of spots and it's based on a proportion of the number of people that show up, and they register in their specific precinct, and then they have a series of votes, and I believe that they go until they go through a series of rounds where they eliminate the lowest vote getter until eventually someone gets 50% plus one or more, and then it slowly works its way throughout the whole state, each precinct throughout the state doing this until they then have the total number of votes, and then from there they decide who the winner is. I believe that's how caucuses work in the states that use them. But there's only Iowa. I know Texas uses a caucus system, and then I think there's maybe one or two other states I'm not thinking of. All of the rest of the 50 states just use a straight up primary system. The people that are either registered to vote with that party, or in some cases you can choose whether you want to vote Republican or Democrat. They just show up, they vote for their candidate. It's like the general election, except they're just picking who the nominee is going to be. That's obviously the more common system. So yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'll go. All right, cool. So you ran in 2020 as the VP, and that's when you sort of shot up to sort of fame, I suppose, is what we can talk about. How do you see, with the way things are going, the Libertarian Party moving forward? Do you think that with more and more people after COVID paying attention to politics, that there's going to be an upswing towards a third-party option in America, or is it still going to be a bit of a struggle in order to get that? Because obviously everything is very red or blue in the States. So just want to know what you think with the Libertarian Party moving forward, how their prospects look, basically.
Yeah, so we've had sort of a steady upswing for quite some time now. When the party was founded 50 years ago, it was really just a protest. No one really took it seriously. No one thought that they were going to win. We would run someone for president and they would get thousands of votes. Like it was not a serious thing. Fast forward 50 years to now, we have hundreds of elected officials across the country, and we have millions of registered libertarians. We have tens of thousands of actual dues-paying Libertarian Party members. We've come a long way, and we are continuing to steadily grow. Not nearly as fast enough as we should, though. The reality is 95% of voters don't really consider us. They don't consider us as an option. And there's quite a few reasons for it, but the biggest reason is I don't think you're going to win. And you can't argue with that. You can't say, oh, well, we would win if you voted for us, which obviously that's true. The more of them that voted for us, the more likely we are to win. That's not a reason not to vote for something. It's a reason to vote for something. I want you to win should be a reason to vote. But the thing is, most people aren't early adopters. Most people don't go, wow, I'm going to get my stake in and start voting now because I want them to win. They say, are they going to win? Because I don't want to vote for them if they're not going to win. And I'd rather vote for someone that, I think is going to win. That's better, marginally better than this side. And that's how people get voting. They do this voting for lesser evils thing, which incentivizes the Republicans and Democrats to just play good cop, bad cop with everyone and not have any real substantial policy differences and just play off of each other's personalities and get half the country to vote for this lesser evil and the other half of the country to vote for this lesser evil. What we need to do as libertarians is have an earlier buy-in. If someone is over here saying, well, some of your ideas sound good. I might even be a libertarian, but I don't think you can win. And our buy-in is over here. Well, no, we want you to join the party and start paying dues and start voting libertarian and maybe even run as a libertarian yourself. We need to have an earlier buy-in. We have to meet them like closer to where they are. And that earlier buy-in is actually what I'm working on right now, which is an organization I'm starting called You Are the Power, where instead of trying to get them to start by becoming a libertarian and voting libertarian, we have them start by working with us on local single issue based activism to fix the problems that they are facing in their communities, in their backyard. So if someone says to me, oh, well, your ideas sound good, but I'm not ready to vote libertarian yet, I say, okay, great. Hey, there's a new tax increase that they're trying to pass in your city or in your county. We're working on fighting against that. Why don't you come join us? Or if someone on the left says, some of your ideas sound good, but we have to stop Donald Trump. And I go, all right, fine. Hey, we're fighting to decriminalize cannabis or psychedelics in your city or in your county. Would you like to join us on that? We can work together on localized single issue things that bring people in, accomplish our goals now, working even outside of our movement and inside of our movement as well. We can eventually work that into bringing them in more and more, having them work with us on even more activism, maybe even having them run for local office as well. And we know as libertarians that the more people hear our ideas on a consistent basis, the more likely they are to actually become libertarian. Not just vote for us because we are the best option, but actually vote for us because they believe in our philosophy, in our ethos. And the best way to do that is to meet them where they are and invite them to come into the things that we're working on that they already share a common goal with. That's what You Are the Power is going to be. We have been doing it as sort of a proof of concept for the last year. We have been successful in stopping bad bills. We have been successful in holding local governments accountable. We've been successful in bringing conservatives, progressives, independents, people that are libertarians but just want nothing to do with party politics, anarchists, everyone else into actual activism. And we've been doing this with nothing but volunteers and basically a budget of what we can pull out of our own pockets. And we've been incredibly successful with it. So now we're going out of proof of concept mode and actually formally launching as an organization.
So you spoke a bit about local governments as well. But at the same time, you're running for the presidential nomination as well. At the same time, running for president and having a vice president. So how do you have those two going together? Like, is it a down ticket voting process, or what's the importance of running for president if you're already doing local stuff? How do those two interact?
Yes, absolutely. In other words, how am I not a flaming hypocrite by saying that we should be focusing on local when I just finished running for vice president? So there's two parts to this. Number one, when I ran for vice president, I was pretty sure they weren't actually going to pick me. I was using my VP nomination contest or my candidacy for the nomination in order to show people different ways, show the Libertarian Party ways that we can run for office. And so instead of just doing the same thing everyone else did and just going to conventions and shaking hands with people and saying liberty, 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 and they go, yes, liberty, liberty, and then we all agree. And instead, I would do things like door knocking tours in poor neighborhoods, housing projects. I would do college campus tours. Again, this was before everything shut down and then we're all on the computer staring at each other. But I did a lot. And then even once that happened, I continue doing like Zoom calls with college classes and things like that to like show that we could, and I'm doing it to talk to them about liberty, but I was also doing it to show the Libertarian Party delegates, this is how we can do it. We can actually meet people where they are, not just constantly talk to each other about how great liberty is. We can actually go talk to the normies too. And I apparently was so good at it that they ended up giving me the nomination. Now, with that said, there is a usefulness to running for president and vice president, or at the state level, running for governor or running for Congress, our version of parliament, running for a federal legislature seat, something that we may not have the ability to actually win yet, but we can use it to bring attention, bring whatever national and statewide attention we can get, and then pivot it to saying, hey, by the way, here's a bunch of people running for citywide office, countywide office, statewide offices that we have a shot at. And that was actually the majority of what I did when I was running for VP. Any event that I did in person when I was doing events, during the 2020 campaign, I would tell the people on the ground who were in the. I visited 35 states. I visited of the 50 states. I visited. Joe and I combined visited, I think, 48 states. So like all but 2 states we visited, and at every one of our events, or at least at every one of mine, and I believe at all or most of Joe's as well, we wouldn't just have me talk. We would have people running locally in that area for city council, county council, running for whatever position, mayor of whatever town there. We'd have multiple people. We'd sometimes have as many as 10, 11 people that would be there running for everything from governor, Congress, all the way down to, races that were much more local. And many of those people ended up winning their races, and they were able to get more attention, get more fundraising, get people that were there that were excited, who would then sign up to help volunteer for their campaigns and do door knocking and stuff like that. So bringing attention and bringing bodies and activism to the people who have the best shot of winning. So there's a legitimate part of that as well. And then a final part of that is that, and this is sort of unique to our system, in many states, in order to have your party on the ballot in the first place, you have to have a presidential candidate. And in some states, that presidential candidate has to get a certain percentage of the vote for them to be able to be on it. So it's actually kind of mandatory for many states for us to have a presidential candidate, even though we know their odds of winning, at least for now, are exceedingly low. We haven't won yet. It's still important to have it, if for no other reason than it allows us to have other candidates on the ballot as libertarians instead of as write-ins or just as independents.
So it's really a matter of ballot access then.
It's a matter of all those things. It's a matter of ballot access. It's a matter of messaging. It's a matter of driving attention to the more electable lower races. It's many different things. And it's why I also, there's been a lot of speculation and a lot of people asking me if I'm going to run for the presidential nomination in 2024. It's something I've not really spent much time thinking about, but I also don't particularly care. Like, I care a lot more about doing the building of the grassroots movement that will bring people to liberty and start accomplishing goals across the country, building a culture of winning within the party and within the movement, and working our way up through the grassroots until eventually we can win the White House and Congress and everything else in between. More so than I care, and even more importantly than that, fostering a culture of liberty where no matter whether we win or whether the Democrats win or the Republicans win or the Green Party wins or someone, the people demand liberty. Not just from us, but from everyone, because that's not what's happening right now. That matters more to me, building a culture of liberty, a movement of liberty, and a path to success for liberty, than being the next guy to get 2% or 3% or 4% or whatever. Like, I'm not against doing that if it turns out that that's the best thing that I can help in that moment, but it's not what gets me excited. It's not what wakes me up in the morning.
Yeah, I wanted to. That was one of the things that when I first discovered you and your work was what your approach to handling the local stuff was one of the things that actually really alerted me and other people that had followed you. That and your meme work. The difference, I think, the reason why that was so attractive is that the difference between when you see what the Republicans and what the Democrats do, and it's the same here with our two parties, is that the groundwork with the local guys and how much effort you put in with supporting your other people was it just showed this connection to the people rather than the party, if that makes sense. So
yes.
I think that was what that's the right attitude to have. I think it's really it's good to see, because usually politicians, everyone hates them. So.
Well, because I'm not, I guess I'm technically a politician because I ran for office, but I'm not a career politician. Like, my career already ended. I'm retired. I had a web design company and was involved in some other startups as well. I'm technically just a retiree that likes to meme and podcast. And then I ran for office that one time. And, so I guess technically I'm a politician, but I don't have the mindset of a politician, because politicians are primarily and sometimes only concerned about getting elected. Not David Limbrick and not your guy. The Lib Dems, not that's not true at all. You guys, those are the good ones. But in terms of like the average, especially like a Republican or Democrat, or I guess in your version that would be like liberal and what are your main parties? The Liberals, the
and Labor,
Liberals and Labor. Yeah, Liberals and Labor, like which is kind of our version of that. They're concerned about getting elected and working their way up the ladder, and whatever the newest talking point is, they'll say and attach to. Whatever the newest virtue they need to signal is, they'll do that. And whatever corporate cronies need to have their pockets lined, that happens. And because it's not about serving people. It's certainly not about giving power back to people. It's about a career of never having to actually do anything in your life and just talk and ruin society in the process, I guess. And that's not my mindset. My mindset is, if I'm going to be involved in politics, it's with the goal of liberating people and using not just political electoralism, because that's another thing. We get so caught up in the electoral politics. That is such a small, exceedingly small part of all of this. That is so far downstream of building a culture of liberty, making people realize how liberty works, coming up with market-based solutions like the blockchain to solve the problems that are being created by government and by corporatism and cronyism, mutual aid and charity, helping the people that are the most in need. All of this is part of liberty activism. All of this is part of setting people free. And, electoralism, running for office, running candidates and all of that, that is a part, and it's an important part, but it's a relatively small part of it. So I hope to never truly be a politician, unless it's because I've been elected to something, and then I will do my best at that. But I hope to never have that mindset, because that is anathema to the actual what the liberty movement believes in.
Yeah, I think one problem we have here is we get too caught up in worrying about elections and politics and not enough time spent on the culture, because we do have the option to elect more minor parties to the Senate. So our Senate right now has 9 Green senators of 76 seats. So because we have that ability to be elected, we don't care about the cultural issues as much, which is one thing that I'll be pushing for. So on that note, how does ballot access work for you guys? Because I know it's really hard to get minor parties and independents running at all.
Yes. So it is. It's tough, man. So we have a federalist system. So every state is different. There are some states where it's relatively easy to get on the ballot. And the state I live in, South Carolina, is actually one of them. There's a fee. You have to pay a fee, but the fee's the same for everyone. And the fee's different for the office you're running for. And if you can pay the fee, then you can run and be registered with your party. So it's actually, as ballot access goes, the state I live in is one of the easier ones. Then you have a state like Tennessee, which is a couple states away from here. In Tennessee, if you want to run for any office as a Republican or a Democrat, you need 25 signatures to get on the ballot. And that, I kind of get that, right? Like, it's like, you don't want any person who says I'm running for this to get on the ballot, because then it would be a booklet. Any person, everyone could say I'm running for that too. And but 25 signatures, it shows that you've got enough seriousness that you could get 25 of your friends and family to sign a ballot and sign a ballot petition, and you mail it in. It shows some seriousness, right? If you want to run as anything other than a Republican or a Democrat, you have to get 50,000 signatures.
Oh, wow.
And and not only that, but you have to go through the court system, the election court system, who decides if your ballots are valid or not. And it's run by Republicans and Democrats. So they do everything they can to disqualify. And if they disqualify one of the signatures on your petition, they disqualify the entire petition, that entire page. So if there's one that they say is wrong, all 25, 30, however many signatures are on that petition, all get invalidated. So in reality, you actually need to get 100,000 signatures, which is, in a state as small as Tennessee, functionally impossible, because you also have to get them in the county that they live in. So even if they're visiting another county, they can't sign it there. They have to sign it for their county. It is basically, the rule is, if you want to run as a Republican or Democrat, no. And there are states like New York that you have to get well over, I think it's 150,000 signatures, but New York's a bigger state, so that's a little bit more feasible. it really runs the gamut. There are some states where it's relatively easy, and there are other states where it is just an absolute bear. But the Libertarian Party was on all 50 state ballots, plus Puerto Rico and Guam, which those don't count, but we still got on those. And we're the only party that has been able, the only third party that has been able to consistently get on those ballots, which means we're the only one that actually earned it, because the Republicans and Democrats, it's basically automatic for them to be able to be on the ballot. So no, ballot access is a very mixed bag here, but on the whole, it's bad. It's not good. And it's funny because the Republican Party and Democrat Party both would not exist had the ballot access restrictions they've put in place over the last 150 years been in place when their parties started. When the Democrats came to town during the time of the control of the Federalists, they would have never been able to qualify under the criteria they have now. And the Republicans sure as hell wouldn't have been able to qualify. And yet we're still able to get on all 50 state ballots. But we spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money to do it that we could be spending on our candidates. But we can't run on that being unfair, which we often do. Because, again, you're talking to voters who are not early adopters. They just want to know how strategic their vote can be. And so if your main focus when you talk to them is, hey, you know how tough it is for us to get on the ballot? Man, it's a struggle for us to even be there. It's a miracle that you can even vote for us. All they're hearing is, we don't have a shot in hell. Look elsewhere if you want to vote for someone who actually has a shot of winning. So we have to sort of take the abuse while not putting too much attention on it, because, or at least not making it about us, because then it makes it sound like we're a bunch of losers. So it's a really, really tough road to hoe when it comes to ballot access. But so far we've been able to do it, and we continue to grow.
So
I do
this
see
why
you
we
consider
see
having. I do see you consider having every man and his dog running for office. I know it's not unusual to see the ballot paper for the upper house in Australia be over a meter long. That's pretty common nowadays from the last decade or so. So I do see the concern there with having this anyone who can running for office.
Yeah. Well, so the way it used to be a long time ago in the U.S., they would just have, like, for example, president and vice president, because we used to vote for them separately, actually. But they would have an office, let's say Congress or governor or president or whatever, and then they just have a blank line, and you'd write in the name of the person you wanted. Now, I can see why they got rid of that, because now how long is that going to take to figure out how 100 some odd million people voted for something? And I mean, I see how most people write. I wouldn't want to have to figure out what they were trying to spell there. But but all that to say, that's how it used to be. And then one day they said, oh, we'll make it easier. We'll just have the main candidates that, qualify on the ballot. And then they said, well, we don't want to have all these names on the ballot. It's going to confuse people. And then they've now, greatly restricted the ballot. And it's incredible when people think how I've actually heard people say, oh, you can't have a third party. Can you imagine how crowded that debate would be? And I think, oh yeah, 3 people on the debate stage. This is a country of 340 million people. And there are like 30 different brands of deodorant. There's like 3 different brands of toaster pastry, and then all the generic, but having 3, not just 2, but as many as 3, God forbid 4, just 3 people who are running to be in charge of the entire government. That's just insane. But when you've been conditioned to believe that everyone is either a Republican or a Democrat, then yeah, a third option just sounds like just like that's just decadence. There's no need for all that. That's too much. But the reality is, in that kind of a seat, there should be like at least 7, 8, 9, 10 main competitors. Like, this is a big office, and there's so many different ways of thinking about how to run that office. There should be a dozen people running for that, like in serious contention, not to mention all the others that don't really have a shot. This should be something contended by a large number of people, at least in my mind.
Yeah, you're right. I think when I was watching the debates for the Trump Biden and Joe wasn't on them, I was shocked. I was like, how can you not have a person who is legitimately trying to run for president not actually get to have their say and represent? Like, that goes against everything. Isn't it go against everything America's supposed to be anyway? Like, you're supposed, yeah.
One would think. Here's another rabbit hole to go down on this. So in order to qualify for the debate stage, it's a privately run company, which it's not privately. It's privately run in that it's not a part of the government, but everyone involved is either major corporate media or a politician or a retired politician, and they get automatic broadcast access, which is something that only the government gets. But they're a private company. And the reason they're a private company is because then they can deny whoever they want, set their own criteria. And their criteria is that you have to get 15% or more in at least, I think, 3 reputable opinion polls. It might be 5. I can't remember now, but a certain number of reputable opinion polls. Well, then the polls don't include us.
Yeah, so
they don't have to. It doesn't say the polls are required because they couldn't require that. They're a private company. And so Gallup and Pew and Zogby and CNN and all the main Associated Press, all the main groups that do their big polling for president, they just don't include us ever. And you'll see, 10% other, 8% other. Well, other means they said something else. And the Libertarian Party is the largest third party in the US. There's no one even close. So it's likely that a good number of those people meant us. Now imagine how much more support we could get if they were actually including us in the polls, talking about us, mentioning the fact that there's a third option. There were 2 times that we got this huge bump in our polling and our fundraising. And it was when Joe Jorgensen got bitten by a bat, and the media covered it because they thought it was a joke. They're like, oh, look at this silly third party getting bitten by bats. And the reaction from the public is, oh, there's someone else running for president? Fantastic. Wow, she got bitten by a bat and still went to her event? What a badass. And so that actually backfired. We got a ton of but it was because they mentioned us once for like 10 seconds. And then the second time that we got a big boost was during that first presidential debate, the disaster that was. And one of the anchors on like CNN, I think it was, said, they're like, Americans are watching this and realizing that they have only 2 choices. And what a depressing thing that must be for them that it's these 2 schmucks. And one of the reporters said, well, actually, there is a third pick, Joe Jorgensen. And we got a huge boost from that. Our website went down. We got so much traffic. Literally just mentioning us briefly got this huge influx of traffic. There are people out there that are looking for another alternative. If the media pretends it doesn't exist, then we're the tree that fell in the woods and no one saw it. But again, our problem has been we focus on how do we get on the debate stage? How do we get 15%? How do we play by their rules to get onto their stage? We're doing it the wrong way. We need to grow a grassroots movement from the bottom up that will turn into a grass fire that is so big that they can't ignore it. By the time we're qualifying at 15%, and by the time they're trying to change the rules to keep us off, it will be impossible to ignore us because we are the news. We are the people making the news. We are the story. We're not just someone going, can you please let us on your poll so we can maybe get like 12% and get close to getting on the debates? We will be something that they can't ignore. They don't want to ignore. It's what everyone is talking about. We need to focus, like you guys were saying, we need to focus culturally. Yes, using politics, but building a culture of liberty, a culture of people who are across the entire political spectrum, who work together when it's time to work together on the things that they agree on to work to set people free. And when we do that, it'll be inevitable that we'll win.
So I guess an idea would be that, like you said, you've got to kind of work outside the box, outside the square a bit.
Yes.
With the advent of podcasting and the rise of independent media and stuff, obviously there's some avenues there that you can utilize in order to get things. So obviously I'm thinking of Joe Rogan because he said he voted for Joe in the election. There's obviously an avenue there that you could utilize. So even if you didn't get on the debate stage, like I would be talking about, well, can we get on with Joe and do a live stream? And then like combat the debate without actually being on the debate stage would be something you'd probably look at.
Long before we get on the debate stage, we will get on Joe Rogan. We will get on Gosh, who's some of the other people out there? Stuff that isn't even political. We'll get on like these like meme live streams and stuff like that. We're already very big in independent media. When I was at an event called Freedom Fest, which is one of the biggest libertarian leaning, I guess it's a kind of a mix of libertarians and conservatives, but it's one of the biggest events of its kind in the country. And I was one of the speakers on the opening night. And then I did wall-to-wall interviews for like 6 days. I was there the whole week of the event, or 5 days, or whatever it was. I must have done 30 or 40 interviews, and not a single one of them was ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News, MSNBC. They weren't even there. But I wasn't even doing local media. I was doing independent media. And some of these podcasts that I was doing had hundreds of thousands of followers. Some of these media outlets that I went on had millions of viewers a day. They have views. They are getting clicks and views and hits. They're just not the mainstream corporate media. Well, that's fine. Those are the people that watch mainstream corporate media are the ones that are going to be the hardest to get, because they're the ones that have been conditioned for the longest period of time that, well, you're either a Republican or you're a Democrat. Which is it, son? But the ones that are already watching independent news, they're more aware of their different options, and they're more likely to say, I don't care how it's worked. I want to do the new thing. You mentioned Joe Rogan, who and by the way, I love when I'm talking about Joe Rogan, I always say, and I'm not just defending him because he voted for me, but anyway, but Joe Rogan on some of his episodes of his show, especially recently when they tried to cancel him, and that backfired spectacularly, doubled his ratings. The average Joe Rogan, there have been episodes of Joe Rogan experience where he has gotten more views of that episode than every single TV show on every single cable news network in the US combined that day. More people watched that 2 or 3 hour long podcast of him talking with 1 or 2 people about 1 or 2 subjects than they watched all 24 hours of like 3 different channels of everything that's happening on Earth, with multiple, anchors, multiple reporters, multiple panelists, dozens of people on each channel, probably 100 people plus combined. Joe got more than that. At this point, the counterculture is larger than the culture. And the funny thing about that is, the only reason that the culture can still call itself the culture is because it has control of the old way of doing things. It has control of broadcast media because of government. It has control of big tech because it has its hooks in big tech. But everyone is saying they're sick of that. And what happens is, those people that are sick of it, they go back and forth. The people that were sick of it voted for Obama because they were sick of Bush. Then a bunch of them voted for Trump because they were sick of Obama. And then a lot of them either stayed on the sidelines or voted for Biden because they were sick of Trump. Many of them still voted for Trump. But they're sick of all of it. The reason they're going back, they're not swing voters. They're just sick of it. They're trying to find someone that they actually think they can trust. No one is a Democrat today and a Republican tomorrow. They're just trying to figure out who the hell is not going to lie to them. They demand to have what the liberty movement offers them. They just don't know it exists, or if they do, they've been told that it's scary and it's dangerous and all of that.
Yeah.
Here's how you fix that. Go into their communities, your communities. They don't live somewhere else. They live in our neighborhoods. We live amongst the normies. We don't live in our own little enclave. Go into our own communities and develop ties with people who want to do activism on local, single issue stuff where you live. You can accomplish goals now, not wait to some utopian future where libertarians are in charge, or liberal Democrats, or I know it's different there, but libertarians are in charge. You bring people into what our ideas are like. You give them an earlier buy-in so you can finish that, working them down the pipeline to liberty. and we can actually show how it works. Now they're not scared of liberty. They're excited for more liberty. They don't say, oh, you're not going to win. They say, wow, look at what we're able to accomplish. What we, not you, we are able to accomplish. And we haven't even won any races in this area anymore. Let's get some elected officials. Now let's see what happens. Now they're excited. We're building a culture of winning. We're building a grassroots movement. We are doing the work that needs to be done to be able to set people free, save people's lives, actually play out our policies in action, not just in thought and theory.
Yeah, and I think also the one thing that the liberty movement is, it's starting to, it's still, there's still obviously the slight breakdown, but it does have the potential to offer unity between the left and the right, which
Yes.
is something that for me especially has been like a concern, the high polarization between people being called far left communists and far right Nazis. Yes. And it's just, none of it's it doesn't benefit anyone. It doesn't help fix any of the problems. And I know that the Libertarian Party, like I know plenty of left libertarians and right libertarians, and it's sort of, there's the potential there to really unite. But like you said, you've got to get that awareness out and go in the grassroots way, I think, is probably the best way. So.
Absolutely. And there's two aspects to that. One is the actual policy aspect, and the other is the divisiveness versus unity aspect, which is really more of a personality and cultural thing than an actual policy thing. But let's talk about the policy thing. So the difference between a left authoritarian, like a communist, like a tanky communist, and a right authoritarian, like a Nazi or a imperialist monarchist or something like that, they will go to war over which side is right because those sides can't coexist. What they're arguing over is which way is going to be imposed on everyone with force. Are we going to impose the total nationalization of all ownership of everything, or are we going to impose a system whereby a small handful of cronies control everything and we're constantly at war to spread and dominate really with both of them? That has to be a war. But with true left libertarians and true right libertarians, now we're just talking about preferences. If we're not imposing our systems on each other, then we can coexist. If someone over here wants to voluntarily live in a commune kibbutz type system where everything or most things are owned in common, where people are working together towards a common good, maybe the culture there, they value protection and equity and equality more so than individuality. Okay, great, good. So you have that there. And if someone over here wants to live in a more privatized society where people own things individually and people choose to work together on specific things, there is still some common ownership, but not as a general practice. Common ownership is still something that has actual percentages based on a stake. Great. They can have that. You know what you're actually going to have is a hodgepodge of different systems that are probably a mix of the two. I mean, you want to talk about centrism, there will probably be a lot of people who go, oh, you know what? Common ownership may work for certain things here, but then individual private ownership could work for other things. But because it's voluntary, because people can opt in or out at will, then it doesn't create conflict. The only conflict comes when someone tries to impose something on someone and everyone else probably kills that guy because he's being, once he actually gets violent, they defend themselves against that person or those people who tried to impose something on them, tried to aggress against them, tried to hurt them. That's good. Now, that's the policy aspect of why libertarianism is better than authoritarianism. Let's talk about the cultural aspect. I can tell you in the US, and I suspect that it's similar there, because it seems like this is replicated in every developed country in the so-called Western world. In the US, there is very little difference between the so-called far left Democrats and the so-called far right Republicans. They might disagree on certain hobby horse cultural issues that really they shouldn't even be deciding one way or another anyway. But when it comes to ramping up wars and engaging in wars overseas, they're on the same page. Whenever it's time to make sure that every single government agency's budget goes up, they do that. Whenever it's time to print out trillions of dollars, they just did it again, another $1.5 trillion spending bill. They come together in record time to do that. Whenever it's time to give trillions of dollars in payouts to the cronies who donate to both of their parties and keep them in office. They do that. Whenever it's time to restrict ballot access and rob voters of having as many choices as possible for different offices and force them into either Republican or Democrat, they're on the same. The way that they distract everyone from the fact that there's very little daylight between Republicans and Democrats, between the parties, that essentially it's a uniparty system where they have two different people playing good cop, bad cop in order to make you think you have an illusion of choice when the reality is they're all on the same side against you. In order to distract from that, they don't just say you're either voting for me or you're voting Democrat. They say you're either voting Republican or you're voting for a bunch of filthy communists who want the Muslims and the Mexicans to come in and rob and rape your women. And they want the thugs and savages. Well, we won't say what color they are, but I think you know what we're talking about. The thugs and savages to take over your neighborhoods and kill all of you. And then the Democrats say, if you don't vote for us, you're not just voting Republican, you're voting for Nazis. You're voting for people who want to rob you of all of your autonomy. You want to vote for people who are going to control women and round up all the minorities and kill them. You're voting for walls. You're voting for every terrible thing on earth. The reality is, it doesn't matter who you vote for between them. You're going to get the same damn thing. Joe Biden just signed a bill into law that was passed by the Democrats that gave another $2 billion of funding for Donald Trump's wall. It's all bullshit. They're lying to you. And what they do is they distract you with this endless adversarialism, good cop, bad cop, right? But the problem here is now we start doing that. It's not just the politicians that are the problem. It's those morons that vote for him. It's not just Donald Trump or Joe Biden that's the problem. It's those damn Republicans or those damn Democrats that are the problem. And so this charade, this theater of opposition that they create to distract you from the reality that they're working together is also meant to distract you by hating your neighbor, your family. How many times, it's probably a similar thing there. How many times have you heard that someone disowned their cousin or their parents or their daughter or their sister or something like that because they don't agree on a policy? They don't agree on a politician? They don't agree on which party to vote for? These people don't care about you. They're living off of you. They're leeches that live off of you. But that's what creates the division. That necessary escalation of division to distract from the fact that they're working together is what turns your loved ones and your neighbors into your adversaries in this endless war between Team Red and Team Blue, or Team whatever the colors are for your parties. Same thing. Even though libertarians aren't centrists from a policy standpoint, what we are is we can stand in the middle of all of that and say, yep, you're both right. You're both flaming hypocrites. Now, here's what we can really do to solve things. And it's a little bit of what these people claim to be about, and it's a little bit of what these people claim to be about. The difference is we're actually being consistent in what we believe, and we're not lying to you just to get your vote. This has a way, by being able to show people the reality of that endless theater, that good cop, bad cop routine, they get to see not only are these people lesser evils to choose from, it's all a facade. You shouldn't hate your cousin. You shouldn't hate your neighbor because they fell for this lie instead of this lie. They fell for the same lie you did, just in a different flavor. And they can start being healing from the reality that even if you don't agree with me policy-wise, that's great. I'm not going to say you're an evil person. I'm just going to say I disagree with you. And more importantly, I'd rather work with you on something we agree on. So another big thing with You Are the Power is we're going to have conservatives and progressives who discover, holy crap, I'm working with a progressive right now. Yeah, because you both happen to agree on this. And if you disagree on this next thing, great, then you won't be working together. But then you can work on the next thing you agree on. So yes, libertarianism, the liberty movement, the movement for human freedom, for liberating people, absolutely has the additional, the good side effect, the additional silver lining of bringing people together and showing that you've all been played against each other for the distraction and entertainment of very powerful, cynical people that don't give a shit about you.
Incredible. Sorry.
I think the whole thing about having a divisive culture that stems from politics, it's all the result of having that binary system. It's all black and white.
Yes.
You know, we
100%.
if you go back in like 2-3 decades in Australia, we did have more of a non-binary system. But these days, even though we have more and more minor parties and independents in the government, in Parliament, we still have that increasing left or right, black and white divide. Ukraine, COVID, whatever the current problem is, and I think it's a very pervasive part of society these days. And I think it all comes from politics.
Almost 100% of the divisiveness in the developed world, I will say. I'm not going to say every single country in it, but I've seen it over and over again. Canada, Australia, certainly in the Anglospheric world, which is a lot easier to cover than, like countries that don't speak the same language as me. But certainly any country that I've been following that's a developed country, and I've even looked at some Latin American and African countries, developing countries, that they've got their two parties. And if you don't vote for this party, then you're a bad guy. And if you don't vote for this party, you're a bad guy. And it's the same thing. That binary choice, which is a false binary. It's not even a true binary. It is a false dichotomy that you're either red or you're blue, or you're either right or you're left, which is funny because if you look at the true political spectrum, they both fall somewhere in the authoritarian center. So it's not even really right or left. None of them are like Leninists or fascists. They're literally, actually, they're probably all fascists, but they're not like Hitler. They're basically authoritarian centrists. And there's like this much difference between them. And it's usually on the more marginal stuff that doesn't matter. Where the reality is libertarians are on a completely different, we span a much wider swath of the political spectrum left to right, but we're on the authoritarian or anti-authoritarian, the libertarian end of that. But all that to say that, it's a false binary that forces people to, I mean, you listen to people and it's like, they talk about that they had to put their pet down because they had cancer, and instead of, well, I had to let my uncle go today. He's a Trump supporter. It's like, really? Like that's because Donald Trump's lies were more appealing to him than Hillary Clinton's lies or Joe Biden's lies or whoever's lies. It was more, those set of lies were more appealing to him than the set of lies that got you caught up. You're going to disown someone that you otherwise love and care about. It's entirely because of a false binary choice. And it only serves politicians and the hyper wealthy. We talk about the 1%. It's like the 0.0001%. You're talking a few hundred very powerful people around the world who control most of everything and who basically determine what the Western developed world is going to do. And that's, it doesn't serve anything. It doesn't serve any of us.
So keeping like what you said in mind, the rumors are in 2024 that Trump will run again and Hillary will run again. So for people who would have voted Trump the first time as a big FU to the establishment, just because it was something different, obviously they're not as impressed with what happened under Trump. Like, obviously he did some good things, did some bad things, all that sort of stuff. But obviously there's a few things that a lot of them were like, well, why didn't he do this? He sort of let us down in terms of trying to clean it out a bit. Do you think that in 2024, if that is the tickets that get run for the Republican and Democrats, that there's a good chance that maybe a third party could actually win it? Because a lot of people don't like Hillary and a lot of people don't like Trump.
So I want to say, first of all, I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's hard to underestimate how much the American people hate Hillary Clinton, more so than Donald Trump. Also, coming out of the next 2 years of inflation, which ironically largely happened because of deficit spending that happened under Trump, but it was with the great support of the Democrats and Joe Biden, and it's part of a series of policies that Joe Biden has been one of the architects of for several decades. So if it's going to fall on someone's head, let it be his, honestly. But ironically, it's actually because of Trump era policies that we're seeing the current inflation. We won't feel Biden's inflation for another year or two, starting off. But all that to say, because of the anger and frustration over what's happening right now, I think it's likely between the two parties, it's likely for a Republican to win, just because of that. And if the Democrats, for some reason, picked Hillary Clinton, if it were Clinton, put it this way, if it's Clinton versus Trump again, Trump's going to win, and he'll probably even get a majority of the vote this time. That's my personal opinion. Many people will tell me why I'm wrong. I haven't been yet. But anyway, so could a third party win? Theoretically, sure. We'd certainly, I think in that kind of scenario, Hillary versus Trump, I think the Libertarians would get way more than we got in 2016 or 2020. I think we'd hit double digits with the right candidate who's able to highlight, not move too far right or left, just highlight that these people suck. Like, these are the people that got us in this mess. And that's who these geniuses decided we should choose from. The people that literally the exact same people that put us in the mess we're in right now. Yeah, I think that would blow up in their faces. Would we win? I don't see us. The likelihood of us winning in 2024 is not very high. Even if lightning struck in every area we wanted it to, I think it would still be very low. But I do think we'd get, if in that scenario of Hillary versus Trump, it's just hard to think about. But in that scenario of Hillary versus Trump, the Libertarian Party does better than we've ever done before, both in total number of votes and percentage. And it wouldn't be close. I think we could easily get 5+%, maybe even get into double digits. I think it would be a rout for us. By our standards, it would be a rout. I still don't think we'd win, but I think we'd get way, way, way more votes. But again, the reason I'm focused on You Are the Power, which is the group I'm starting, and the localized activism, is I see this as a little bit of a longer term thing. I don't think that there is a path because of all the hurdles that have been put in place. The ballot access restrictions, the complete shutting out by major media, the refusal to have us on the debate stage, the refusal to include us in polling, the fact that we have inertia is that we have the inertia of not having a bunch of elected candidates at that level. The fact that the majority of voters really need to see what libertarianism looks like more locally before they decide to vote for us federally. I don't see it happening in 2 years or 4 years or something like that. I could see it happening within 10 years. I could see it happening maybe by 2028 that we could have a candidate that wins because we've been consistently doing the grassroots work, and not that something magic happens in 28, that we have been retaking the culture. We have been taking back our communities and our culture for liberty and showing people across the spectrum what that means. I think that could happen. But yeah, if they run Hillary and Trump, we're going to get a ton of votes. We're going to get way more votes than we got before.
So then I know your focus is now on the grassroots stuff, which is fine. So for everyone else though, if with the Libertarian Party, then obviously with how your system works, is it likely that Joe would end up being the candidate again in 2024, or is it is there people that you think would end up being potential candidates?
I think Joe's certainly in. And by the way, I don't know if Joe is running again, so I don't want to speculate on that. But if she decides she wants to run, then I think she's definitely in the running for that. I think if I decided to run, I'd probably be in the running for that. There are others that have already announced that they're either have announced or made it fairly clear that they're going to be running. It's honest, but it's honestly kind of wide open. It could be. So I'd say if I had to pick 4 people that it's likely to be, it would be, well, let me say 3 people minus, because I haven't even decided if I want to run. But outside of me, the 3 main contenders would be Joe Jorgensen, a guy named Dave Smith, and Justin Amash, who was the Libertarian Party's only federal congressman that we've had. He was elected as a Republican, but he ended up joining our party before his term was up. And so those would be the 3 main people. And right now, who would have the most likely path there? It feels like a bit of a toss-up. I think there are some that would say that Justin or Dave. There would be disagreement over whether it would be Justin or Dave would have the most likely path. I think I learned from the 2020 race where everyone was certain who was going to win, president and vice president, and none of that happened. that our way of choosing candidates, because it's such a small number of delegates, it's a very mercurial, hard to predict thing, and a lot can change in the last few weeks. And it's for me in 2022 to guess what's going to happen in probably May of 2024, I couldn't even tell you. But I would say it would the most likely, at least right now, of the ones who would run would be Joe, Dave, or Justin, or if I decided to run me. Again, there are a few others as well, but I'd say those are the four main ones. And which one would it be? I couldn't even begin to tell you.
Can you run for both positions? Like, are you able to put in? So, say if you wanted to run.
To run for both VP and president?
Yeah, is that possible?
I honestly don't know. I don't know. Well, first of all, let me tell you, I'm not running for VP again. I did that. That was fun. Thanks a lot. Not doing it again. But theoretically, could you? I know you can run for president and then decide to stop running for that and run for vice president. I know a lot of people, when they lose the presidential nomination, they then drop back for the VP nomination. That's what happened with the guy who came in second to me, John Mons. He had been running for president, and he actually wanted me as his VP. But then once he didn't get president, he decided to drop back and run against me for VP. So I know you can do that. Can you run for both of them simultaneously? My best guess is that you can, because I doubt there's any federal law that prevents you from doing it. And I can't imagine the Libertarian Party telling someone they can't do something. It's just, that's how we are. We're like, yeah, sure, run, do whatever you want. So unless there's a law against it, which I doubt there is, I think that you probably could. You'd have an odd presentation to make there, because you'd basically be saying, hey, I'll take whatever you got. Like you wouldn't really be able to run like as president, I want to do this, or as VP, my ideas. But it's like, hey, I want to be somewhere on this ticket, wherever you want. Maybe, I don't care, or maybe not. I don't know. So it would be a hard sell. But my best guess, I don't know this for certain, but my best guess is that you probably can do it if you really wanted to be like a serious glutton for punishment. You definitely could.
So my thinking of that was less of the person who was doing the running, more of the people who were picking the people running. Because, like, for example, if you were to run for president, then you would if someone wanted to support you and you didn't win the president, they want you as VP at the least. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. So, yes, they absolutely can. I got a couple write-ins, I believe, for president. Some people that decided not to run for VP got write-ins for vice president. We let our delegates choose whoever we want. I think Harambe got like 7 votes. Like we let our delegates choose who they want or what they want. I think some people actually voted for a meteor. Like it's the party. Our party is pretty much as wide open in terms of letting people choose who or what they want for that. But yeah, I thought you meant in terms of actually running for it. But no, voting for it, we're pretty wide open. Now, I don't know if I know we couldn't legally actually nominate someone for president and vice president. I do know that. So I guess that's one limitation we have, is it would have to be 2 separate human beings. Other than that, we're pretty wide open.
Sorry. Cool. Okay. So what to cover now?
What's happening with those time zones being changed to daylight saving time? Why'd they change that, of all things?
So I can tell you, as someone who lives in a state that goes from it's nighttime at night to it's nighttime at 4 p.m., 4:30 p.m., I am so sick of, I actually like daylight savings time where I am, like, which is what we just went into. Like it's brighter during the actual hours you're up and about more. I wish they'd just keep it there. And so what the vote that they just did in the Senate was to make this permanent, to make daylight savings time permanent. I don't know if it's going to get taken up in the House. I don't know if Biden said he'll vote for it. I believe they've been doing this for years now. It's like every time they change the clocks and everyone's all pissed off and we have an uptick in heart attacks and car accidents and everything else. And the government says, we're going to change it this time. And then they don't. I hope they change it. Supposedly, if they change it, it's not going to take effect until next November or something like that. Which, why? If we've decided that we're going to just stick to this time, then let's just do that. Why would we wait? It's like, this sucks. Let's not do this 2 years from now. Like, no, let's just stop. Like, it's already the time you want it to be. Let's just make it that. I don't know if it's going to happen. I mean, the fact that the government can't it's overwhelming. Like 80-something% of America, every opinion poll shows the vast majority of Americans just want to just pick something and stick to it. We'll just be that time. Like, and most of them, like you kids, don't remember what it was like when you had to change most of your clocks. I mean, now they all update automatically. Back in my day, you had to actually change the clocks. Oh, it was terrible, and it was uphill. But they say this. The fact that government can't even just do that shows just how inept of a way doing anything is through government. But we'll see. I hope they do. I hope they change it. Let's just make this the time and not do this anymore. We're not farmers. We're not worried about saving candle wax. I don't know what the justification was, but it was probably stupid back then, and it's even stupider now. Do y'all do that? By the way, do y'all do that? Do you change your time? Okay.
Well, no, I don't.
Half the country does. So South Australia, New South Wales, Victoria, and Tasmania do, and then Northern Territory, Queensland, and Western Australia don't do it. So it's even weirder because South Australia is a half-hour time zone. So normally they're half an hour behind me, but right now they're half an hour ahead of me because of that saving time. So they get affected by that. Plus they're half hour. Yeah.
It's hard to deal with. I don't know. It's stupid.
They're our Arizona. They're our Arizona when it comes to time zones. It's ridiculous.
Well, except Arizona. So Arizona just doesn't participate in the daylight, the switching. But we don't have any half-hour time zones. So where is it that it's like if it's 1 o'clock where you are, it's 1:30 there?
Yeah. So that's South Australia.
In the middle.
In the middle. Middle bottom. So which is the state Yeah.
That's the most insane. Okay. No, I'm listening. It works for you. No, I'm happy for you.
Which state has the weird half the state has daylight saving time, half doesn't? Which state is that? Which state does that in America? One of the states that has half it, like one state divides into two.
We only have one state that doesn't participate in the time switching, and that's Arizona. But it's the whole state. Yeah. We don't have any of the half stuff, and we don't have any half-hour time zones. My God, that sounds like a nightmare. Like it's bad enough. So like when I'm talking to someone in California and I have to okay, they're 3 hours behind. So if I'm free from 1 to 3, that means I'm free from 12. I'm free from 10 to 1 to 10 to 1 but like that, or 10 to noon, and then a half hour.
I'll make it even worse for you. The Northern Territory, which is above them, is a half hour as well. But they don't go daylight saving time, so they're the same time all year round.
Oh no! So then it's like the half hour. Oh God! Oh, that sounds worse than the thing where they built the wall for the dingoes and then it made it worse or whatever. Like no, God, that's
time zones here suck as well.
That sounds like a nightmare. Like I would just ask someone, like, what time is it right now? I wouldn't even try to keep track of it. I would just say, wherever you live right now, wherever you exist right now, what time is it? And then I'd look at what time it is, and I'd have to just, hour and a half or 2 hours. Oh, Jesus, God, that sounds terrible. I mean, you've survived as a country, which, by the way, not only have you survived as a country, but you started as a prison colony and have turned into a full-fledged country. And that's impressive that you go from we're here, so I guess we might as well make a country out of it. And then we get a proper developed country. That's fantastic. It's great. But then here's my theory, because you're no longer a bunch of convicted felons who aren't allowed to leave, and you've relatively tamed all the monsters that live there that want to kill you. So now you're like, let's come up with new struggles. And so the new struggle is, I don't know what time it is where you are. And there's no real way for me to know because it changes every few weeks. That's the new struggle that you have. And you seem to be getting along well with that as well. So I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Okay, so.
Oh, I wanted to get your thoughts on that new Stacey Abrams appearance in Star Trek. If this came out overnight, that she's been in the latest Star Trek episode as Earth President.
Oh God.
I was not. Did she also make everyone else wear a mask, but she didn't have one on? Because that was that's the thing I know. So the last time I heard about Stacey Abrams, she went to she's in Georgia in the Atlanta area, and she went to I believe an Atlanta public school, and there's this photo of her just sitting there with the students, and she's smiling. She looks happy. Everyone else in the photo is wearing a mask. Like all the students, the teachers and staff and parents behind, everyone, there's like a couple dozen people in the photo. They're all wearing masks and she's not. And it was like the most dystopian, like, let them eat cake. I'm better than you. You're the peasants, the peons. I'm clean. You're dirty that I've seen. So I would hope, in order to stay true to form, that as space president in Star Trek, that she would be the only one not wearing a mask. That would make it realistic.
That was such a weird photo because, like, the kids are less at risk than she is of COVID, and yet they're the ones wearing masks.
Yes, she was the most at risk there. Yes, literally, if statistically, she was the one who would be worse off if she got it, and like way worse. But the kids,
yeah, the masking the kids is a nuts one. We're doing that at the moment. Like it's I don't know. None of it makes sense. It's
especially children, especially young children. The idea, I've met enough. I don't have any kids, but I've met a few, and you don't have to meet a lot of kids to realize that if you tell a 7-year-old they have to have something on their face all day, that's not going to lead to cleanliness. That's not going to lead to better health. Like there's you need to spend some time with a child and then tell them, here, put this on your face all day long. That is a snot rag now. That's going to be their snot rag. And then they're going to trade their snot rag with someone else because they got sick of the cartoon character on theirs and they like the Pokemon or whatever on the other one. And so now they're trading their snot right on each other's faces. They don't care. They're kids. They're filthy. That's why they get sick all the time. And like the idea that this mask policy is working with kindergartners, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, like you clearly have not met children, or you have, and it's a lie and you're just doing it anyway.
Yeah, you have a fear from getting punishment. That's what.
Yes.
That's what a lot of it is. It's more about worrying about getting punished. One of my sons is in that age group. We had to get him an exemption for it. He's on the spectrum, so it was like we're not sending him to school with a fucking mask on because it was gonna. They would just send him home. He would have flipped out and just wouldn't have handled it.
Sensory.
That's
stuff.
Yeah, that's the other thing is it's leaving out neuroatypical kids, autistic kids. It's leaving out kids that are. What about deaf kids who need to have, for those who don't know sign language, that it helps to have the lip reading to be able to do that. What about the fact that, I mean, they're already saying I know there's been some studies and some speculation even before that just not seeing faces all day is going to lead to a reduction in communication skills, interpersonal skills, that faces are a big part of how we interact with each other, and that's just being robbed of them. Not to mention how much of the time they spend, in a Zoom class, I thought, okay, a bunch of 6-year-olds on a Zoom call, like there's no education happening here. They're not, the learning isn't that you're sitting there, you've got them keeping up with the curriculum. The learning is the whole experience. And that's not happening on a Zoom call. And it's just the whole educational the way that they teach, that they, at least in the States, and I suspect there as well, the way that they dealt with education during all of this was just a giant FU to kids. It was like, you are the people we care about the least in all of this. You're the ones who are the least likely to die of COVID. You're the ones who are the least. I mean, basically, it is effectively rounding down. It is a 0% chance of them dying. There's been a few hundred children who have died of COVID in the U.S. and with the numbers as low as they are, it's likely that every single one of them had, that they were either on chemotherapy or there was some other reason that they died, which is still a tragedy. But you can't make a policy that harms tens of millions of children and makes their lives harder for something that is almost basically is not going to hurt them in any real way. And is not going to stop them from getting it or spreading it to others. It's just the whole thing has just been, and it's been done from a standpoint of, well, it might work. Like, we don't care the harm it does. It might work. It might help with this, or it might not, but we don't really care. Like, it really has been an anti-children way of looking at all of this, and that's been disgusting. I'm able to take one more question, and then we can wrap up from there.
Do you have any more questions, Centrist?
I'm good. If you want to wrap it up now, I'm happy with that. If you got
okay, we can do that too. Either way.
Yeah.
Well, no, I had one more. I wanted to ask about
cool.
about the midterms and how you see the LP playing out in the midterm elections. Because people have seen Biden's inflation, the Ukraine war, all the COVID cases, which he said he'd stop in 100 days. How do you see that playing out in the midterms?
Yes, he's not going to shut down the country. He's going to shut down the virus. And by shut down the virus, he means have like 4 times as many cases as happened under the previous president. So let's take a step back to how we've done so far. So in 2020, in the election we were in, we got dozens of elected libertarians, one of the best showings we've ever had. And then something really cool happened. I was going around telling libertarians, hey, we need to focus locally. And they all were like, yes, that's the same lesson we took. So in 2021, there was a special election to fill a bunch of seats across the country where someone either died or retired or whatever. It was in like April of 21. And we had a few dozen races that we were in there, a couple dozen races we were in. And we won nearly 60% of the races that we ran in. We won a majority of the races that we had a candidate in, which was the first time that ever happened. Then in the 2021 general election that we had last year, we won over 200 races. Over 50%, over 50% of the races that we were running in, we won over 200 of them. It was a record number of elected libertarians, a record number of victories, and a record high percentage for a general election. I believe that if we continue to have the gains that we've had, and especially now that we're ramping up things with You Are the Power, my goal is by the end of 2022 that we will have gotten 1,000 new libertarians elected to office, and I included 21 in that. So we need to get about just over 700 wins to be able to get my goal of getting 1,000 libertarians elected to office. And from what I'm seeing state to state, the candidates that they're running, the ground game that they're putting forward, I think it's very realistic that we can win 1,000 races. Now, most of those races are going to be local races. They're not going to be congressional races. They might be a few state legislative races. I guess your version of like a state parliament. But we have to win somewhere, and we have to build things up somewhere. And so I do think that that's going to happen. And yeah, I mean, it is not hard to argue that things suck right now. Even Democrats aren't trying to, an increasing number of Democrats are not even trying to pretend this is okay. All they're saying is, yeah, well, Trump's bad. Yeah, no, we agree. Yeah, Trump's bad. We agree on that. We're not friends of Trump or Republicans. So if we play our cards right, and if we really lean into this and not try to present ourselves as some kind of, milquetoast electable alternative, but just saying, listen, they've failed you. Trump failed you. Biden failed you. We are by the end of this year, we are 3 years removed from the failures of both Trump and Biden playing out right in front of you. let's do something new. I think that we're going to do great. I think that we're going to have a record number of wins. I think we're going to continue to grow, and that the rate at which we are growing is going to continue to grow. So I'm excited for it.
That's good to hear. Before we finish up, do you have anything you want to plug? Where can we find you, Other Power, as well?
So right now, the website will be up very soon. Right now, if you go to spikecohen.com, you can fill out my form and be on the list of people to join once to be notified once it's ready to go. That's if you go to spikecohen.com, you can do that. For those who are just watching and want to stay tuned to what's happening, we will be launching sooner than later. I'm hoping by the end of this month we'll be launching. If not, it'll be in this coming month that we will be launching. And when that happens, we hope to have your support. Now, I do need to let you know, You Are the Power is going to be a political action committee, because we're actually going to want to be able to run candidates and endorse candidates. So, unfortunately, that means if you are not an American citizen, we cannot accept your money. But we can't accept your rah-rahs. So you can like our page, you can share our content, you can help promote it, but you cannot give us money or join it, because that's very illegal, and you won't be the ones who will get in trouble. I will. Yes, exactly. Yes, Australia Gate, exactly. Spike Cohen is going on foreign entities to promote it. But no, I mean, if you want to show your support from afar, that's fantastic. If you want to give, you have to become an American citizen. And that is a much more involved process. Than just signing up on my form. But we'd certainly be happy to have you to follow it and follow what we're doing. And if you want to look for me on social media, I am everywhere. I'm on pretty much all the major social media platforms. If you look for Spike Cohen, you'll find me. And the true North Star, if you ever get lost and you're looking for me and can't find me, just go to the ATF page and look for their next post, and you will find my comment on there. And that is everyone's North Star. If you get lost, just look for the ATF post, and you'll see my newest comment on there, and then you can work your way home from there. And thank you guys again for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.